Welcome to Wayward Writers. I'm Senior Literary Agent and author Heather Cashman.
I'm author and writing coach Stephanie Bearce.
And I'm author and writing coach Nicki Jacobsmeyer.
Our mission is to nurture and enrich established writers throughout their publishing journeys.
We welcome all genres, age groups, and publishing paths through video podcasts, online webinars, in-person retreats, and more.
We're here to help you conquer your path.
We're excited to have you with us today to talk about how to create positive relationships with indie bookstores. And we're here with Mickey George of the King's English Bookstore in Salt Lake City, Utah, and Emily Schrone from Main Street Books in St. Charles, Missouri. Thank you for coming today, both of you.
Delighted to be here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to give you a little bio. Yes, thanks for coming. I'm going to give you a little bio on Emily here. I've known her for a while, and Emily Hall Schrone grew up in a Midwestern suburb on a steady diet of books and anime. She earned a BA in English from Truman State University and worked with Birds of Prey and insurance before settling into her final form as a co-owner bookseller at Main Street Books in St. Charles, Missouri. She's a prolific reader of YA fantasy and romance novels and loves yelling about them to any customers who will listen. Heather, could you introduce Mickey for us?
I would love to. I've known Mickey a long time. We were Pitch Wars mentors together, and absolutely, I'm so grateful to have her with us today. So, whether in a library, bookstore, or writing her own, Mickey George has always been surrounded by books. Her debut young adult historical Speak Easy, Speak Love, which I highly recommend, came out in 2017. She's written 2 graphic novels, a standalone fable, The Heart Hunter, and the comic sequel to the Enola Holmes film series, Enola Holmes, Mycroft's Dangerous Game. She lives in Salt Lake City with her queer polyamorous family and manages the events at the King's English Bookshop. We're so glad to have you guys.
So fun. Well, welcome. We are excited just to dive in with you guys and just have a real authentic conversation about the relationship between writers and authors, and you all as also authors, but in this scenario more as bookstore owners. So let's dive in with what is your favorite aspect of being an indie bookseller, and then what is your biggest challenge? Emily, we'll start with you, please.
It's one of those questions that I don't get asked a lot, but it's one of those things where you're thinking about it all the time because you just can't believe that this is real life. It's so exciting. My favorite aspect of being an indie bookseller, besides being able to access 80 bajillion books at all times, which is, fabulous. And also getting to talk to incredible authors such as yourself. Really am gratified by the connections that I get to make with the community as an indie bookseller. Having those moments where somebody walks to the door, somebody who's been a customer for a long time, and you get to smile and say hello to them and ask what they're reading and recommend something new. I don't know, it lifts the spirit quite a bit. So it's being an indie bookseller is to be a part of the community. And that is one of my favorite parts of what I do, is just being a part of St. Charles. Thing that is the most challenging, there's a litany. There's rising costs, there's book banning, there's the leaning away from anything diverse, anything queer, anything. But one of the things we struggle with as an independent business in general is that, I'll get it cheaper somewhere else mentality. With good Midwestern folk, we don't like a confrontation at all. Whenever just this morning, small kid was up here and they're like, I want this thing and it's only this much in this month, but we'll get it on Amazon. It's fine. And just and you want to say something, but you also let me here call you out in the middle of the store in front of your child. Yeah, exactly. There are actually stores that have Amazon swear jars where there's like a little jar on the counter and it says Amazon swear jar. And if you say Amazon, you have to put $1 in the jar when you're in the bookstore.
Oh, wow.
So, anyway, that's our challenge. Yeah. St. Charles, just in general, is pretty receptive to its bookstore. We've been very lucky in that regard. Every so often, we'll come up and the entire New Age witchcraft section has been turned around in its book stand, but that doesn't happen very often. So we're pretty lucky.
Good. How about you, Mickey?
I think for the things that I love about working at and for an independent bookstore is very similar. I love also that it's very community based. I have a 13-year-old girl who memorized my shift schedule because she was like, I will only get recommendations from you. And I've loved every book that you've ever recommended me. So she comes in with her mom on the days that I work so that she can get a
That's
new
amazing.
book recommend. And I love that part. The other thing I love is watching the sort of word of mouth rise of new baby authors because they're indie darlings, basically. I think independent bookstores are one of the few establishments who can actually push the needle on book sales, who are genuinely driving it based on the quality of a story or the quality of a book and not just trying to make a quick buck. And there's a lot of authors who like started really quietly and grew a lot over time because independent bookstores were championing them, even though they were like, you're not a bestseller yet, but we can tell your writing is so good and you're going to get there. And these indies lift them up. And I think it's really great. As for the hardest part, yes, like Amazon, but also I think balancing, because no one that I know is in independent book selling for the money. No one's making a lot of money and everyone is just really passionate about books.
No.
But at the end of the day, you are a business and you do have to stay afloat. And so balancing like your passion and your community support with also being like, we need some of that support to come back to us because we are a business at the end of the day and need to stay afloat. And I think something that authors don't always understand is how like razor thin book profit margins are for bookstores. So we're one of the last remaining like fixed margin markets. So we're only getting a tiny bit of money for every book that we sell. And we can't, like Amazon loses money on all their books, but they can afford to because they're Amazon. So they can just stockpiling. My least favorite part is that you have to remember that you're a business and keep the financial stuff in mind so you don't end up going under.
That's tough. We've just recently had an episode about money, and unfortunately, love doesn't pay the bills. We want and need to get paid for our craft, and you all have a craft in what you do because there's plenty of bookstores out there that it's a time clock. They're punched in, they're punched out. We've been there, and it's not a community and it's not a connection. And we feel ya. We see you both.
We too.
Thanks.
We appreciate you.
Yes.
I love our indie booksellers. And one of the things that I do think that you guys can see is some of the trends or new developments that are coming. What trends or new developments in the industry are you guys excited about or see coming? The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right now, I would say, I don't know if you see this a lot too, but one of the trends that to me falls more on the bad and ugly side is how publishing is turning a little bit into fast fashion. And they're having these books like The Fourth Wing and The Iron Flame on such a tight publishing schedule. And they have to get printed really fast. And then they're not printing enough copies. And so sometimes they're shoddily put together. So we get copies that are half falling apart, but they're trying to like push them out a little faster. And this is no shade on any authors at all because I don't think they have control over this. And it's also no shade to publishing directly because the people who really love the books, these editors and publicists, are really doing their best. But there's so much pressure to, again, keep a certain margin of profit. And so I see a lot of books that are picked up off of TikTok and then published so quickly, like from acquisition to being on our shelves happens so quickly that it's more about trying to get them out and get them sold rather than producing a really quality book. I think as far as trends, I personally kind of love the romanticy trend. I think it's really fun. And I love that it's turning like a generation of 20 and 30s people who stopped reading back into readers. I think it's really valuable for that reason. And it's hard to say because in Salt Lake City, we are in the like Mountains and Plains Book Association. So we're seeing a real big uptick on Western books and not just like literary Western books, but also like cowboy romance books and a lot of like indigenous voices and diverse voices. But I don't know if that is true
across the country, but it is true in our part of the indie book world.
I will very much agree that romanticy is on almost a straight vertical trajectory right now. That is what everybody is into. And there's no stopping the Red Tower train right now. The sprayed edges, exclusive editions, all that kind of stuff. Red Tower just had another book released today, The Wren and the Holly Library. And I certainly am not going to sit here and knock Red Tower for their business model, because they've really hit on something that is currently just so much a part of the zeitgeist of reading. Not necessarily bookselling, not necessarily the industry itself, but just in terms of what readers want. They want the bookshelf trophies. They want the sprayed edges. They want the fancy end papers. They want all of it. So that has become something that we like nowadays. When I go through a catalog, and I'm the primary buyer for the store, when I go through a catalog, if I see a sprayed edge, if it's even remotely good for my store, I'm like, okay, 3 of those, let's see, 5 of these. It's an automatic buy, because all of a sudden there's going to be a run on the bank like there was in Fourth Wing, and you're going to be SOL if you don't have them, which happened to us with Fourth Wing. But yeah, that I'm interested to see if the bottom will fall out from that. I'm not sure what's going to happen. It's going to be super interesting to watch the trend and see because if you remember, the year the coloring books exploded, like adult coloring books. Do you guys remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. Adult coloring books were like
2016.
every single publisher, every single people. Yeah, it was bonkers how they exploded. Then all of a sudden they were just gone. Like, it was super, super weird. So I don't know if the market's going to get flooded. I don't know if people are going to run out of money. I don't know if there's going to be a recession. I have no idea. That'll be interesting to see what the trend of the sprayed edges looks like. I'm also noticing there's a big uptick, at least for me, looking at through like the romanticy catalogs and everything. And a lot of the romance catalogs, there's a huge upward trend in sapphic love stories, which I'm very excited about. So straight white ladies have no stake in that particular game, but the fact that there's now an incredible amount of sapphic representation in romance it just warms my heart. It makes me so happy. There's a couple that are on my list. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I have to read this thing. There's a book coming out in the fall called The Phoenix Keeper that I'm just delighted to sink my teeth into. Anyway, there's lots of good things that are happening. But yeah, I keep my eye on the romance and the romanticy trend because that's what I'm into.
Here We Go Again by Allison Cochran. She's one of my favorite sapphic rom-com writers right now. So I've just been recommending her. Because I agree with you. I think there's a lot more than there used to be. Or the ones that were there were one note. And now there's this really pretty broad sampling, which is really fun.
It's excellent.
I love it. Book recommendations on top of everything. This is the best.
Oh, you know it. We can't.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to what you guys are looking at, because you look at the catalogs and I'm looking at 2 years ahead of your catalogs. So I'm trying to look even further back at what is coming down the line and find out from editors. So talking about what's coming and the future, how do you see the future of independent bookstores going? And do you think that what gives you hope and what concerns you about the future of indie bookstores?
Since the pandemic, and obviously the pandemic is still ongoing, but since the pandemic began, there's been an uptick in support for independent businesses, because we saw in real time in 2020, 2021, that if you don't support your local businesses, they go away. And that's it. That's all she wrote. And the fact that people are still choosing to support their indie bookstores is excellent. That's really gratifying. So there are people that are still very much making sure that they're buying books from us. I also think that, and I'm not sure, Mickey, what your experience is with working with publishers. There are several who are trying to at least make some kind of effort to offer an indie exclusive edition. So there was an indie exclusive edition of the Third Crescent City book that just came out this year. There's been indie exclusives for, I think it was indie exclusive for Scarlet St. Clair for the last Hades and Persephone books. So there are versions of books now that you can only get through independent bookstores. And they're not going to do it for every title because that's more money on printing different things. But at least for the big crash bang titles, or they're offering like pre-order incentives. So if you order the new TJ Klune book from us, you get a print and a button or whatever it is. So it's like indie exclusive merch or giveaways or whatever it is. So they're at least understanding that independent bookstores need a little bit more incentives you need a little bit more of an incentive to go to an indie bookstore because most of the time you're going to pay thicker price for a book and not get it for 46% off on Amazon, which the new Eric Larson is currently 46% off on Amazon. Ask me how I know. So that at least is good that publishers are starting to be like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll throw indies a bone here. My worry is always about recession, is always about the bottom falling out. Books technically are a luxury good. If people are hard up for cash, they're not going to want to pay $32 for a straight edge copy of whatever it is. They're going to get it cheap. They're going to get an ebook. They're going to get it off Amazon. So always the looming specter of recession. And then costs are going up. There are publishers that are charging now $5 more than they were charging for a particular book 5 years ago. I'm looking at the YA space right now. The YA space is freaking bonkers. You used to be able to buy a young adult novel for $17.99. They're edging up into $24. It's absolutely ridiculous. So the prices are going up. It's difficult to reconcile the price of a hardcover book with what you can get it for somewhere else. So anyway, so that's a little bit scary.
I think I'll just echo everything that Emily said, because I do think that indie bookstores have survived as long as they have, whereas like Borders and a lot of these other chain stores, at least in Salt Lake City, our Barnes and Nobles have been dropping like flies. I think there's one left, but we're still there. And now we have actually 4 independent bookstores. And I think the difference is the localism and that community tie and feeling like you are participating in community.
Mhm.
And in addition, because we also will do pre-order campaigns and incentives or an indie exclusive, which I do think helps, but also publishers reach out to indies first for like events and tours of authors because they could rent out like a bigger facility and just ask like someone like Amazon, like just show up with 40 cartons of books or whatever. But they still primarily do these tour stops through independent bookstores. So that part is nice. I love the way that people are engaging with bookstores now. I think that they're becoming a third space for people. I think that my generation of like millennials who went through the Harry Potter, Twilight, Hunger Games pipeline, and now we're reading like mostly romance and science fiction and fantasy. We saw so many people at Independent Bookstore Day just because they were like, let's do a bookstore crawl or let's post on Instagram. So they're into it for the experience and the connection and stuff too. And I think for the most part, independent bookstores know their communities and they're smart and they're leaning into these places and adapting where they need to adapt. So the money stuff is always a worry, and books are getting more and more expensive. Sometimes I bring up someone for 4 hardcovers and I'm like, geez Louise, is that what books cost right now? But our profit margin is teeny tiny. So we're not marking them up more expensive than they need to be. It's just paper costs more and cost of living is higher and just everything is more expensive now. So books just cost more and it's hard to be able to afford. And I love public libraries too. And I think it's great to use your public library, but it does put like a bookstore, as Emily said, in like a luxury good or like a unnecessary but nice expense. And that part can be worrying. But I do think as far as like role in the community, like you would notice if you didn't have any bookstores like in a city. And I know there's plenty of rural places that don't have a whole like independent bookstore, but I think most highly populated areas would notice the lack of a bookstore. Like it plays a bigger role than you think. And
I would agree. I think it's so important.
I'm always cutting people off. Anyways, but I am excited because I think that even as publishing changes and even as bookstores change and how we produce books will change, what hasn't changed in centuries is that people love well-written, good stories and are always hungry to have them and consume them. So I think even as things change, people are still going to want that connection to books and reading and experiencing a story together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like when you go into an indie bookstore, time slows down, which is one of the most precious things that no delivery driver can give that. And it is an experience for everyone that's involved. And it makes me think you had just said, Mickey, when authors have an event that they call their indie bookstore. And I know that Stephanie and I have done this with Emily and Main Street Books. And so On that note, how important is it, or can you echo it, for authors to engage with their local communities and indie bookstores?
Very important. Sometimes, I don't know if this is true for Main Street books, but every once in a while, especially more indie or self-published authors, which we do not mind hosting indie or self-published. Like we have absolutely no problem with that. The only trouble is book distribution can be a little harder to get a hold of. If your book's not on Ingram or something, then the ordering becomes tricky. But most of the time, like, we'd love to have you and we'd love to host you. But some people, especially with a bookstore like the King's English, who's been around for almost 50 years, they come in and they're like, oh, because I'm doing a reading at the King's English, there will be like 30 people there. And I'm like, there won't be. Like, if you don't tell anyone about this event, or if you give everyone a free copy before you come, or this is your 5th event this month in the same 25-mile radius, there's going to be like 2 people there and no one will come. I just don't think they know. We have a system at our bookstore where you can do a full event package with us, but you can also just pop in and do a pop-up signing, which means we'll just set you up with a table. We'll sell your books. You can meet readers and sign. We're not setting up chairs and there's not like a reading or a Q&A. And we had someone come in to do a pop-up reading and we sold his book and he was blasting on a TV an advertisement that said, click this QR link to buy it on Amazon. And I wish we had an Amazon swear jar that day to be time it was on a loop. And there's things that we're like, oh, we just didn't even think to tell you, please don't advertise your book on Amazon in the books. So there is. And again, I think it's just a kind of level of ignorance. But I would say if you want to connect with your indie bookstore in your community, just contact them and have a conversation and be like, how can I show up for you too as a partner? Because most indie bookstores do want to support you and they do want to have you and they do want to make your career successful and make it worthwhile for us too. And just being willing to have that conversation and kind of learn how book sales and books ordering works usually is all you need to do to make it happen and make it a good event on both ends.
Oh goodness. You don't know what you don't know. Even with traditionally published authors, there's still that barrier of entry almost, because making sure that you have a positive relationship with your independent bookstores requires a certain almost humility. It's just that you have to I have seen the gamut of people come in to the bookstore and have like the entitlement of somebody who has brass balls and somebody who's I wrote this, but like your mind, can I find them? Like it just runs the spectrum between those two things. Really, what I tell authors when I speak to writers groups or things like that, my first thing that I tell them is to do your research. That's what you do as an author. You do your research, and that it works for books and it works for talking to your local independent bookstores. Visit websites, look at what their consignment program is, look at who their consignment coordinator is. Come visit the store just as a customer first. It's so important if you want to have a good relationship with your local indie. It's so incredibly important to make sure that you understand how that indie works within your community first. And as a local author, they're going to be your biggest champion if you are theirs. It's a reciprocal relationship, which I know that I don't like to be like, oh, you scratch my back, blah, blah, blah. But it's how it is. It is business. You're exactly correct. So yeah, it's hard to let people know that when their only experience with publishing is, I'm going to self-publish this on Amazon. And you don't know that independent bookstores are in dire competition with Amazon. You don't know that Amazon is undercutting independent bookstores. I cannot tell you the number of emails we get from prospective consignment authors who are like, and here's the link to my Amazon website. Yeah. I'm not going to click that link. Like, sorry, I'm not going to do it. They don't know. They don't understand. It's pure and simple, just ignorance, and not like willful ignorance, but you just don't know. So the best advice that I can give is just do your research first. And we have a big old thing on our website. And in the about section, we have a big old consignment page that details our consignment agreement, that details when our consignment coordinator is there. It makes perfect sense to me to be okay, if I need to do this, how do I go about it? And then the process is all listed there. And traditionally published authors have it a little easier, especially if you're distributed by a larger publisher. You can just stop in. I had authors stop in and say, hey, I'm published by Penguin Random House. I'm published by HarperCollins. I live in the area. Would you like a copy? Would you like an ARC? Would you like a download code for NetGalley? Something like that. And that's just offering that here, I will give you this thing so that it makes your life easier as a bookseller. Because I also don't think they know how many requests we get daily basis. And I'm sure you get way more at King's English because English is
it's
King's
a
English.
lot. And I'm sure it's just as it is for agents and editors too. And we are like physically a pretty small store. Like we don't have shelf space to share, to just give away. And we get tons of emails about people who just want us to stock their book. I will say that if you're just some random Joe who like mass emailed a bunch of bookstores, please stock this, even if it is from Penguin Random House, there's a good possibility we like won't. But if you're local and we just didn't know about you, like we do want to know. So I'm really happy if the local author is like, hey, I have been published or I am getting published and telling me about your book. Like I do want to know because maybe we just missed it and we do want to support our local authors in particular. And I would say, again, do your research. We have had authors who don't even know they need an ISBN for their book to be able to stock them. We, similarly to Main Street Books, we have a whole, we have all that information on our website. And if you can't find it, it's totally okay to call or email and someone will be able to point you to where that information is. I would also say the other myth, the bookstore myth that I come across a lot, and there are exceptions to this. There are a few bookstores that I think this actually is their main source of income, but it is the exception more than the rule, is that indie bookstores make most of their money from events and that authors are doing us a favor by bringing like programming and events to us. But the opposite is true. If we break even on an event, I'm like, that was a successful event. Like we almost never make money on our events. More frequently, it's the opposite, that we're losing money on events. But our metric for success is often not financial. It's like community support, giving readers access to their favorite authors, bolstering a relationship between a publisher or an author or something. I think authors don't realize that I'm like, you are not doing us any financial favors. And you are, in fact, probably doing the opposite. So keep that in mind, that it costs us more money to run the event, which doesn't mean we're not happy to do it, because there are other benefits and other advantages to running an event and keeping stock of an author's book. But it is not the way most of us make money. So
you guys have given some great information that I think authors are going to really appreciate knowing. It's very helpful. A little bit more about indie published books. How do you decide which self-published or indie published books you're going to have in that really valuable shelf space? How do you make that decision?
Can I just tag on to that?
Yeah,
Can I tag on to that too? Because I think even just catalogs of traditionally published books, maybe it's a two-part question, but it would be impossible for you to even shelve all of the books that are coming out from the traditional houses.
Exactly.
So
I'm just the irony of it right now. It's like the acceptance and rejection never ends for anyone. Like the booksellers are like,
it doesn't.
you win. Not that's how you guys feel, because I'm sure you're won all of these. But my readership and my bookstore is not going to buy these. They're going to buy these.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's a continuous thing. So we're all doing this for the love, right?
Yeah.
And if skin is not thick, then it's going to be even more painful. But I'm sitting here thinking, oh my goodness, I know you all got beautiful new shelves, Emily, but they're only hold so many. And I have not made it to Utah, but it is on my list, Mickey. I want to come
full already.
But do you know what I mean? Like it's just, it's unbelievable what, this business.
How valuable that shelf space is. How do you make those decisions?
How grateful to even be. Like right now, I'm like, oh, they have a book of mine.
Great. Hooray, this is great. I'd like to share with you really quick. So I just went through, I have an appointment with my Macmillan sales rep tomorrow. Okay. Let me see if I can find it. So I have an appointment with my Macmillan sales rep. Macmillan Publishing is one of the big five. They're one of the ones that, hey, we have, 80 bajillion everything. The catalog that I looked through for Macmillan Publishing for the fall season. So this is for late August through early January. That's the fall season for bookselling. The catalog is, hold on a second, let me see. The adult only catalog. So this is literally just books published for adult that are coming out between end of August and early January. There are 674 titles in this catalog. And that is just adult and just Macmillan and just football.
Can I be so bold and ask about average how many you will be able to select of over those 600 titles?
In this catalog, out of the 600 titles on my Macmillan fall order, I have 173 units of 45 individual titles.
Okay.
45 out of 600.
And I'm assuming you guys know your audience really well
Yes.
at your stores, Mickey and
Yes.
Emily. And so you're choosing based on past sales.
This is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
So what it says in our consignment, if you look at our consignment page or consignment parameters, while we have some specific guidelines for consideration, Main Street Books reserves the right to accept or deny the application for consignment of books into our shop based on a subjective but straightforward understanding of our customer base and what we sell. This is the same policy we use for choosing books from our major publishing houses.
Okay.
So I've been doing this for 10 years. This is the longest I've done any job at all. I've been working over full time for the last 10 years, maybe a little less now that I have a 1-year-old who's decided to just almost walk. But I feel like I'm pretty good at this by now, and not to toot my own horn, but I've been running a small independent bookstore for a decade, and I understand what sells, and I understand what people are going to flock to, and I understand what trends I need to be clocking in on top of. So it's difficult to say, to lay down parameters. I will take a book if it's got this spice level, and I will take a book if it has these bright edges, and I will take a book if it's by this author. It's difficult to say those things with certainty. But when I look through a catalog, I can look at a page of 50 books and say, okay, I don't need any of these because they don't fit with my customer base because of XYZ reasons. This is a hardcover and it'll sell better in paper. This is a romanticy that I probably could get away with ordering 10 copies. I'll just do 3 because of XYZ. It's very nebulous. And I know that a lot of people think, and a lot of people do have big budgets or understand like the turns and their square footage in their store, and they understand that. But like for us, I probably could have a better handle on it, but honestly, it's very vibey, which I know a lot of people hate that.
I think that's absolutely true though, Emily, and you should toot your own horn. So I'm not the book buyer, I'm the events manager, and our book buyer is named Ann Holman. And sometimes I will be like, and I'm going to this event, and it's not even it's like a conference type thing, and I want to know which books of what should sell. And I'm like, oh, Ann, you only got 10 of this book. Is that going to be enough? And she'll just be like, she'll look at it and she'll be like, oh, those aren't going to sell. I'll be like, okay, I'm just going to trust you. And sure enough, I get to the event, they don't sell. Like she just has this like razor sharp instinct for what books will actually move and what won't. And I think that is true for a lot of book buyers at these independent stores as they hone those instincts. So it is a little vibey, but I would say for authors, that does mean that the same as any gate that exists in publishing, a lot of it is subjective. And so if your book didn't go through or didn't pass a book buyer's vibe check, it doesn't mean your book is bad or that they wouldn't stock it if you didn't redraw their attention to it or something. And at least with our store, because we have a decent sized staff, some independent bookstores only have like 2 or 3 people, but we have enough staff. So our book buyer knows that I read a lot of graphic novels and a lot of romance. So she will be like, okay, here's Macmillan's adult catalog. Will you look through the romance titles and clock any that you think will be a big deal that maybe I don't know about? So she will also get input from like other booksellers if they read a genre that she doesn't so much. But I really think it is like a real like magic honed skill that some of these booksellers and book buyers have to just know what is going to like trend and be good. So
I really appreciate your knowledge and your willingness to share it all with us too. How best as authors, and for listeners in our audience, most of them are authors of some kind. What's the best way that we can support our local indie bookstore? What's your dream author, and how can we be that dream author for you?
I will say, so Emily mentioned before, we will still support authors even if they haven't scratched our back first, so to speak. But there is a lot of reciprocity in independent bookselling. And I know that we have local authors who we just love so much. And if they were like, sorry to do this to you, I have an event in 3 days, it's 2 hours away, could you please sell my book? We'd be like, you know what? We will do it for you because we love you and we want to be there for you. So we go out of our way for these authors. And I think the things that stand out for us is anywhere, any event that they do, they make a point to give us a shout out and say, please buy my book from this store. They offer exclusive signings at our store. So they're like, if you want a signed copy, you have to go through this independent bookstore. Like that's the only place that you'll get it. Offering to do pre-order campaigns with us, like coming in a day if you live nearby. And if you don't, then that's different. Or you could send signed bookplates, but offering stuff that is exclusive to the independent bookstore, encouraging people to shop from us and highlighting that it's important to shop like local businesses, and also just mentioning us and all, because sometimes these authors have way bigger platforms than we do. And the fact that they choose to include us and support us is really great. So to me, it feels like a partnership because then we also go out of our way for you and we're trying to like make your event or your signing or we're like hand selling your book because we love it so much and we like love you so much. And I think the nice thing about independent bookstores and what makes it different from Amazon or Barnes & Noble or more corporate lines is that we are run by humans. So that means each independent bookstore is a little bit different and there can be flexibility. I think there's not like a checklist that is do this and this and you will be like an excellent partner. I think it will shift depending on who your independent bookstore is and how they best run either like their events or their local author highlights or whatever it is. But the nice thing is too, is sometimes they will bend the rules for you a little bit too, and vice versa, where it becomes a really mutually beneficial partnership where the bookstore is lifting you up and you're lifting the bookstore up. And I think that's the kind of partnership that we look for in authors that we want to do business with the most.
Dream author. For us, it's somebody who is really all in to partner with us and who understands that we love our local authors. You are our favorite people. We love to see you. We love to work with you. But at the end of the day, I have 10,000 titles in my bookstore. It is so hard to focus on just one thing. And as much as I would love to feature every single book individually, it's impossible to do. We don't have the time or the bandwidth to do it. So a wonderful author partner to us is somebody who understands that, yes, my book is one of these 10,000, but who comes in and says, okay, I'm really excited because my book is here at the bookstore and I'm going to throw it out on my own socials, in my own channels as much as I can. We're happy to chat about various collaborations. We're happy to chat about signings, all that kind of stuff. But it's really just somebody who understands the limitations of the store and who is really gung-ho to feature the store and do their own thing. The thing that baffles me a lot of the time when an independently published author comes into the store and wants to consign their book is sometimes they don't even have a Facebook page, like for their book or for their author page. They don't have a social media account. They can't advertise. They can't push anything. They have maybe even a bare bones website if they have a website at all. And then when the consignment period expires and they haven't sold a book, they come back and they say, oh, what could we have done to sell more books? And you have to be your own biggest advocate. Unfortunately, because of the way publishing is these days, you get the top 5 people that they throw all their advertising money at and everybody else. You really, just as an author, to partner with an independent bookstore, it's very important that you understand that as much as the independent bookstore wants to support you, we have another 9,999 titles to support, and you are going to be your best advocate for yourself.
Absolutely.
Especially because our channels, like Mickey said, our channels are not your channels. They're not the same. And you might have a bigger following base than we do. You might have more followers. You might have a beat on what people like. People are following you for a reason. They are your friends and family. They like your books. They like your genre. They're part of your writers group, whatever it is. So your people that you connect with are going to respond better to your saying, my book is available at Main Street Books. They're going to respond better than our followers saying, what the hell is this book that the bookstore keeps posting about? Like, we're not going to just give us the next pack of Yaros. Like that kind of BS.
Makes total sense.
Yeah. So it's just an understanding of our limitations and how you, as the author, are the person who is the best person to champion your work.
I really love that's what we're deciding and coming to. We have to be our own champions, and at the same time being able to champion our local bookstore. I think that is a great way to do a partnership.
I just had a quick question for Mickey, since you are also an
Yeah.
author. Because I have some friends that work at indie bookstores that are also authors. And my question I always have to them is, how has working at an indie bookstore changed, positive, negative, both, your views as an author? What could you share with those of us that don't get to work
Right.
at an indie bookstore?
That's a really great question. So there's two sides of it for me. The emotional side, because when I started working in an independent bookstore, I was coming off of another job where I was writing for a video game studio, and I was severely burned out. And I was like, I actually don't think I'm ever going to write like ever again. Like, I just don't have it in me. And working in an independent bookstore and being surrounded by books and people who love books, it genuinely reignited my passion for reading and for books. So I think the benefit for me of working in a bookstore is that I'm like, oh yeah, like books are the best. And so then I get like really jazzed up about like writing again. And I get so it genuinely reignited my passion. I will say on the flip side, it's humbling in a good way, because you really come to realize there is not a lot that is in this author's control. So we sell my books at the bookstore, but I'm not like, oh my gosh, you guys, we have to face them out. As Emily said, I recognize that I'm one in 10,000 ones in this store. And I'm really grateful that they keep it because I work there and whatever. But it just, it makes me realize that there's so much else going on. And there's so much that's not in your control, because even when I'm reshelving a book and I'm like, okay, this book was all faced out, which means that it'll get sold more because it's faced out, I have to rearrange the shelf for no other reason than space issues. And a different book gets spaced out. Or because of the way the alphabet works and because of the way our stock is, your book is on the bottom corner of this shelf. And that has nothing to do with you or the quality of your book. But it does mean that like in that store, it's probably going to sell a little bit less. Whereas in another store, if you get to be on the front display, maybe you'll sell more. And those things, they're just out of your control. So I think it was good for me in a humbling way to be like, people still love books. I love books. This is worth it, even when I'm not making a living off of it. And B, I should not beat myself up or get too down on myself over sales and things that are genuinely not in my power to shift. And there are like layers upon layers, because the book buyer has to choose what to keep on the shelf. Booksellers get to hand sell the books that they read, and maybe they would have loved your book, but they just didn't have time to read it. Even like libraries or other places are also having to choose what books to keep. And there's a lot of factors that go into it. And it also makes me realize the pros and cons of indie publishing versus traditionally publishing. Because I think that there are certain pros of indie publishing, but also it's so much phenomenally easier for a library or a bookstore to carry and sell books from the big five. So you lose some control and some publicity, but you also make life easier. And so it also helps me understand the nuances between these two different publishing paths too, that are both like beneficial in their own rights. But yeah, sorry, I went on a little long, but I'll say this.
No, you're good. It's a big question.
That's
I
fine.
mean, so for sure.
It is. Any final advice for our authors, for our audience? Go buy a book at your indie bookstore.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Support your local
Yes,
indie
yes,
bookstore.
yes.
Yes.
That is huge. Absolutely huge. You have to make sure that you understand where your indie bookstore is coming from. And if you're not a customer of your indie bookstore and you want them to be supportive of you, then it's two-way street. But
Absolutely.
that, and do your research and be patient with us.
Being patient with us is about the good one too. Like,
Excellent
we will get
advice.
back to you. And I would say, even if you're not published yet, you could start building that relationship now by being like, a customer by going to other author events, to just like showing up. Because we do also learn the faces of people who are normally in our store, or even if you live like a little ways away and you're ordering online from the store, we also even learn those names. I feel like to be like, oh, it's so and so, like back with another cozy mystery this month or something. And I don't know, I feel like I get really fond of these repeat customers. So it's not too late to build that relationship. And I think, to repeat what Emily said, you are the biggest champion of your book. And there's a way to do that, that you are recognizing that you're in partnership with another business. They're not going to drop everything to make everything about you. Also, it's okay to be like, no, I can be the one kind of taking charge here, or recognizing if you don't want to do that, then you probably won't see a lot of sales or people. And I think it's okay to be like, I don't love doing any of that. You just have to accept that maybe the sales and the events are all going to be quieter too. And if you're okay with that, then that's fine. But
thank you both, Mickey and Emily, for being with us. This was so much fun. I feel like I learned even more than the stuff I didn't know. Thank you, everyone out there. Please go support your indie bookstore. And thanks for being with us on Wayward Writers.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Wayward Writers.
Let's connect. Find us at waywardwriters.com, X, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
See you next time. Conquer your path.